When Black plaintiff Lakira Walker speaks on her experiences in Alabama's correctional facilities, the first thing that comes to her mind after being incarcerated since 2007 was the abuse in prison labor. Walker talks about the various years she spent in multiple different state prisons and how her, along with her inmates, were forced into working. In today's age, it is easy to say that slavery is a thing of the past, when in reality, it not only still lingers in our society, but it is aggressively present under our noses. On October 11, 2023, the Innocence Project released an article that states, nearly 60% of people that have been falsely incarcerated since 1992 were African American. And once in prison, people like Lakira are forced to work under the potential threat of punishment or longer sentencing. Throughout history, since slavery has been supposedly abolished, there have been several consistent loopholes to keep Black Americans enslaved. One of them even being written in the Constitution. The 13th Amendment states that slavery nor involuntary servitude shall be accepted except as a punishment for a crime. This has led to historical mass incarceration and prison labor with lasting impacts on the Black community. And with this systematic control and economic oppression, we have been controlled for hundreds of years. So today, we will take a look at the history of prison slave labor, its modern day existence, and our two critical implications to uncover an oppression as old as the country itself. Although slavery was officially abolished with the 13th Amendment in 1865, there have been various forms of exploitations, often referred to as neo-slavery, which continued several decades after the Civil War. We can take a closer look at the start of this neo-slavery through first, Black codes, and second, convict leasing. First, Black codes. An article written by Britannica on July 3rd, 2024 states, Black codes were restrictive laws designed to ensure African Americans' availability as a cheap labor force within the U.S. And under Black codes, many states required Black Americans to sign yearly labor contracts as an attempt to appease economic concerns after slavery had ended. And if they refused, they risked being arrested, fined, and forced into unpaid labor. This then led into the creation of pig laws. PBS on December 9, 2023 states, pig laws unfairly penalize poor African Americans for ridiculous crimes such as simply being unemployed, and many misdemeanors or trivial offenses were often treated as felonies with harsh punishments and fines. And with this being enacted directly after the Civil War, this was made to significantly target African Americans, leaving the majority of them to become felons, and inevitably leading to the first instances of mass incarceration within the U.S. Next, convict leasing. With a way to target African Americans and unfairly incarcerate them, the U.S. government needed a way to force them to work. The Liberty Congress blog on May 17, 2024 states that there was an exemption of a prison convict leasing system of involuntary servitude to fill the labor shortage left in the southern states after slavery had ended. The creation of convict leasing was a huge score. And with the implementations of Black codes and pig laws restricting African Americans from even having a job, while also making it a crime to be unemployed, the stage was set to reinvent slavery under a different name. And while states profited, prisoners earned no pay and often faced inhumane, dangerous, and deadly working conditions. Although Black codes and pig laws have been left in the past, neo-slavery through prison labor is still alive and well in the U.S. And we can take a closer look at the evolution of this neo-slavery through first, today's modern mass incarceration tactics, and second, outsourcing this labor to corporations. First, today's modern mass incarceration tactics. An article written on May 16, 2023 by the Pew Trust states that the large growth of the U.S. criminal legal system by the late 20th century led a widening racial gap in incarceration. And by the year 2000, Black people made up almost half of the prison population while only making up 13% of the U.S. population. Furthermore, black adults were still being in prison in 2020 at 5 times the rate of white adults. And with America having the highest incarceration rate in the world, its over-policing of black communities and harsher sentences for black individuals, the problem has only and will only get worse. Next, outsourcing this labor to corporations. With a way to keep black Americans in prison, these prisons started outsourcing this forced labor to corporations. The ACLU on October 3rd, 2022 states incarcerated workers typically earn little to no pay, with many of them earning just pennies an hour, despite incarcerated workers producing more than $2 billion in goods per year. And now, these states have started working with companies to outsource this forced labor. Capital B News on July 17, 2024 states, only 4 states have signed to outlaw this forced labor of incarcerated workers. And as for the rest of the country, people are still being forced to work, often for private companies, or face punishment, effectively enslaving them. This shows that America is still built off the blood, sweat, and tears of African Americans, like it always has been. After taking a look at the history of prison slave labor and its modern day existence, we can now turn to our 2 critical implications. First, compounding economic disparities, and second, the inherent contradiction of the U.S. prison system. First, compounding economic disparities. This perpetuates the cycle of disenfranchisement for black Americans. An article written by Arizona State University on August 15, 2023 states, time in prison means that black Americans are even more marginalized, and they tend to return to living in neighborhoods that are already distressed by high levels of joblessness. This inherently affects the black household. This takes black people who already start at a disadvantage in the education system and the workforce and makes it that much harder for them to reacclimate to society. An article written by Cap 20 on December 13, 2024 states, black households affected by incarceration only have a fraction of the wealth of white households affected by incarceration. This cements the cycle of poverty for black Americans, leading to higher rates of incarceration and even higher rates of recidivism, with generations of black Americans being exploited by the same system that caused it in the first place. These economic disparities have served as an echo to pig laws, which was originally made to criminalize black survival, now simply repackaged as an economic and judicial oppression. But this oppression isn't just domestic, it's international, keeping black Americans chained to the same system that kept them disenfranchised in the first place. Next, the U.S. prison system highlights many flaws, with one sticking out above the rest. The goal of rehabilitation has always been a myth when it comes to black prisoners. The Prison Journalism Project on June 22, 2023 puts it plainly, prison is useless for rehabilitation, and the amount of money that these prisons profit from outsourcing this forced labor directly disincentivizes rehabilitation for black prisoners. The U.S. Department of Justice states that more than 600,000 people are released from prison each year, but studies show about 2/3 of those folks are likely to return within just 3 years. The goal of prison has always been to punish. And once they have learned to profit off that punishment, the goal could never be anything else. Plaintiff Lakira Walker is working with a class action landmark lawsuit to what her and her supporters believe to be an unconstitutional forced labor scheme in Alabama's correctional facilities. She is working hard to break the cycle for others in her situation. So today, we have taken a look at the history of prison slave labor, its modern day existence, and our 2 critical implications. For too long, our protests for the effects of slavery have gone ignored. It is easy for many to say slavery is a thing of the past, but we both know it is alive and well in the U.S., just existing under a different name.